One question I did have for you as you were describing is that, peak performing individuals, it's very clear when you've got a, Lewis Hamilton or a Lando Norris or, you've got Ronaldo, like you got players on the team, they're very visible. But then there are, for the most of us, we don't have ultra high peak performing people around us all the time. But there is that potential that you talk about. So as a CEO, if I'm listening to you saying, okay, I buy that I need to invest in my team. I buy that the journey needs to begin sooner rather than later, both in myself and my team. But I can't afford to, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to identify the person or the people, because I buy the notion that everybody can improve performance. And that's what I'm underwriting when I hire them. But how do I pick the ones that have got really that potential to be truly peak performers? Because there is that sort of, handful who become Cristiano Ronaldo or Lando Norris or Lewis Hamilton and so on and so forth, right? There's only a few of them. So the business world of that, is there any guidance on how to identify people who will hit that sort of top mark?
So let me pick up on the point of the Ronaldo or the Hamiltons of this world.
Yeah.
One of the dangers is that some people's interference can propel them to become so important that there's no room for others. There's no room for others to excel or to shine. And there's always a spotlight on stage, but it doesn't mean that everybody else is in the dark. Everybody is lit. There might only be one particular spotlight, but everybody is lit. And sometimes you might want to think about the broader scenario of what might be getting in the way of me having a truly highly performing team that's made up of multiple people who are at or approaching peak performance. Not just one person that's pulling the team along, but actually a team of peak performers. So I just wanted to pick up on that point because there's a nuance there, right? If I think of some of the footballers, for example, that I've worked with, I would say some of them have been at continuous peak performance, both for their club teams and their national teams, but may not have carried the spotlight or the headline in the way that a Ronaldo has, for example. So your peak performers are not necessarily the ones that are constantly being talked about or in the spotlight. They may just be at peak performance, making a huge difference, but going about their business quite quietly.
Yeah. That's really helpful.
And it's not that one's right and one's wrong, by the way, Rohit, but it's making sure that we're not singularly associating peak performance with star of the team. It may be, but it may not be.
Yeah, I think the point that you raised in there was also an interesting one, because if there's one person, who is that star, then there's a lot of pressure on them. And so when they break, the whole team breaks. So you've also got to create as a leader, especially in the corporate world, but it applies in football and in a team sport, which is where we play, albeit not on the pitch, is you've got to have a team. Because if you're just, we often in private equity or in investing, you could talk about key man risk or key woman risk or key person risk. And if that person, something were to happen to them or they were to leave the company, half the enterprise value walks with that. And so you can't really have that in that sense. And so those listening could sort of relate to that yes, it's important to invest in those who can be those stars, but you've got to think about all the others that are contributing to it. And in fact, what I would go ahead and say is what you're saying is you may not have all stars. In fact, it's probably better off to have a lot of peak performers who are peaking at different points in time, because then the team keeps moving forward. And going back to the first episode of high performing teams, now there's a team peak performance happening, but as a result of different people. And it also allows to take weight away from individuals, but then other people can sort of say, hey, look, this is their turn, right? And they're sort of peaking and this is their territory. So in business, it would be like a sales thing or an operational thing or a product thing or a marketing thing. Different functions would peak at different times, but the overall company benefits from that. So as CEO, thinking across the pool of people is probably the right way to do it, as what you're describing.
Absolutely. That one performer, in addition to what you've said are the risks. There's also the risk that as the leader of that person, you can subconsciously be caught in the trap of making the wrong decisions for the team as a whole in order to satisfy that one star performer. And, if you take that to its extreme, the star performer becomes useless if everybody else in the team leaves. And leaving doesn't necessarily mean resigning. It may mean just shutting down or becoming diminished versions of themselves. So there's all sorts of risks. Yes, I think so to come back to your initial question, how do you identify those people? I would say if you're the leader of a top team, your investment needs to be in every member of that team. When I go and do the work that I do with CEOs and their senior team, the CEO brings me in to work with everybody on that team. Because there is untapped performance in everybody, including if there is a current star of the team. So for everybody to be on that journey is super important, both for themselves and to see that everybody else is investing in themselves predominantly. Yes, the company is investing in them, but at the end of the day, they could refuse to be part of the process, right? But the power of seeing everybody recognizing the desire, the need to invest in oneself, with the company, with the CEO supporting that process and doing it him or herself also, that's where you're going to get your biggest bang for the buck, right?
Makes a lot of sense.
Your nirvana is we've got a bunch of people who are on a journey at or close to peak performance, the combination of which is happening at the same time as us moving to high performance as a team. That team becomes pretty untouchable. Now, does it last forever? Probably not, because you've got to keep reinvesting. You've got to keep reinventing. People will come and go for all sorts of reasons, but it can be sustained over the long term. There are some businesses out there that give us that example. There are certainly some sports teams out there that give us that example. Yes, the cycle turns around, but that's because the risk is you become complacent about these things. That's, again, another human trait, right? That's just a human trait. But without that complacency, you can sustain individual peak performance and team high performance over a great period of time.
Yeah, and I think we see that a lot of manifest in the investing world, whether it's private equity or VC. But when you've got a founder-led company and you've had a team, and then you start to bring in new talent and groom them, I think what also allows to happen is that company starts to get to the next level, and there's a reason that people are tapping out. And again, it's no one person. Obviously, some individuals bring more useful things than others, depending on the scenario. But as a collective, the team 2.0 tends to do it better than team 1.0, and then 3.0 will probably do better than 2.0. And so I think that's unbelievable sort of insight that as people are listening in, so you can say, hey, look, I've got to really go back and reflect on myself as a peak performing individual. Where am I on that curve? What are my interferences? Start working on that. Number two is think about people around you as a collective, as to who are the ones that you want to invest in right away. How do you think about the broader team in light of that? And then ultimately, what are the environments that you as a leader can create for everyone to sort of start reducing their interferences and allowing that potential to shine a lot more? Because only then you're going to get to that peak performance level.
Right.
David, this has been phenomenal again. I think we're starting to head towards the next episode, which is all about leadership and how leaders, one of the questions that I will have in that episode for us to discuss is, how do leaders, cultivate and improve peak performers, and how do they balance the stuff that you just talked about, the balancing act, because that is one of many challenges of leaders that we'll be talking about. But before we end this episode, as we wrap up, what are some leaving thoughts, once again, a do and a don't for a CEO when you reflect on, peak performing individuals, whether it's for a CEO or a person? It could be for people listening for themselves. What's one counsel each that people can implement as they reflect on this discussion?
Yes. So I would say, I think it's probably highly likely that people and leaders so far have predominantly, if not exclusively, focused on leveraging potential. And therefore, my experience tells me that there are only small marginal gains to be made here on in from that. I'm not suggesting forget it. I'm putting it into perspective and saying that actually the do is think about whether it's you as an individual or whether it's you, the leader of a group of individuals. How much time are you dedicating? How much thought time are you dedicating at the moment to working on interferences? And if the answer is not a lot or not at all, that's your next step, because the gain that you will make in performance terms is substantial. It's where you're going to get the biggest leap you've probably ever made in your life so far. I'm very confident in making such a bold statement because I've seen it over the last 25 years. You will make the biggest performance gain you've ever made in your life if you have this as your focus going forward. So without a doubt, that's my do recommendation to individuals and to leaders of others going forward. And my don't or my stop, don't believe anymore that you're the only person with these thoughts, with these feelings in the moments and the kind of examples that you and I have talked about today. You are absolutely not. And even though you may look out and only see swans around you, to continue our bird analogy, if I may stretch it this far, Rohit, those swans are paddling like hell below the water. In other words, those people that you look at and think are great also have a duck that quacks, and probably quacks as often as yours does, but maybe they're just that little bit further in their journey of doing something about it.
Yep.
So my final do for this episode would be make the choice today to do something about your interference.
Subscribe to the People Quotient channel where leadership meets action. Powerful conversations with practical insights that you can use right now. See you in the next episode.